I like though when I get to work with actors who like to play around a little bit. And like give you an example, Gabriel Byrne when we did Usual, we threw the script away.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
and it's wonderful when you know you can just he's just so talented.
Yeah, he is.
And so and then asking Baldwin, who's what a trooper,
Uh,
to hit him. I asked him if I could hit him in his chest with the cigarette. And the third take, I hit him in his eye. I didn't mean to. You'll see the cuts like this. He's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But he was so cool about it. So
yeah,
cool.
that was
they
a
were
great
a great
scene.
bunch of guys.
Oh, I'm
they were
sure.
a great bunch of guys. Yeah.
I'm sure.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of $1 Million Day Player. I have no idea what number episode this is actually going to be. I'm Amanda Mack, and this is an episode, a podcast that is dedicated to the insanely talented and criminally underrated Peter Greene. Each episode, I pick a film that is one of my favorites of Peter's, and I discuss it with a co-host that is usually a lot smarter and funnier than I am. And on this episode with me, I have the lovely Peter VanPelt. How are you, Peter?
Pretty good. I don't think you have to worry about having a co-host that's smarter or funnier than you at this point. I think you finally met your match or outmatched your co-host.
Well, I think that's a compliment. That's a compliment.
Yeah. It's a compliment. It's a compliment to you and a put down to me, by me.
It's a backhanded compliment to yourself.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, perfect. And we are discussing The Usual Suspects and Pulp Fiction today, which are, I'm going to be completely honest, these are not my favorite roles of Peter's. I love that they are out there, and I love that they exist, and I love that people talk about them, and that they create like these films have created like mental space for Peter in people's brains, but this is not the scope of his talent, these two roles, and I kind of feel like that's kind of ends up that's kind of what ends up happening in people's minds, like they kind of fit him into these two roles, and they can't really see him as anything outside of these. And now I just sound like I'm complaining about him being in these movies, and I'm not. I'm really not. I have seen the scope of Peter Greene's talent, and these films do not fully illustrate those. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Well, to be fair to Peter Greene, though, I didn't remember him at all from The Usual Suspects. Even after you were like, yeah, he played Redfoot, and I'm like, who the fuck was Redfoot? I was wondering if it was a True Romance type situation where what was the guy that played the commissioner on the Batman movies that was in True Romance? He was it's gonna drive me crazy. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, me either. I know exactly what you're talking about though.
Old British white guy. But yeah, he played a pimp in True Romance and was not like anything I've ever else seen him in, and I didn't recognize him in that. So I was like, maybe Peter Greene plays the old Turkish guy from or the old Hungarian from this movie, and I just didn't recognize him in makeup.
No, he's Redfoot.
I was like, was he the guy that kept going like, guys are sozy? Like, no, that wasn't him. No, he had a whole part in there that I had forgotten.
I remember watching the Usual Suspects for the first time, probably a lot later than a lot of people did. I didn't see The Usual Suspects until I was well into my 20s or so.
That happened to me with a lot of movies too, and I saw all the parodies before I saw the movie. Like,
yes,
because everybody was making fun of The Usual Suspects, but like as a kid, you're like, I don't get it. Why do they keep dropping coffee cups and stuff?
Right? Yeah, exactly.
I think I saw it post Scary Movie. Like, I don't think I saw The Usual Suspects till after Scary Movie.
Oh God, you know what? I want to say that's what happened with me too.
Because there's that huge reveal at the end of Scary Movie where Doofy is the Kaiser Soze of the whole thing, and I was like, I don't get it.
Yeah, I went to the theaters to see Scary Movie, and I know I hadn't seen The Usual Suspects at that point, so it's been a while since I've seen Scary Movie, but I imagine I had that exact same moment where I knew that there was a major pop culture reference happening, and I just did not understand it.
No, I actually watched it for the first time. I was staying over at my cousin's place in Texas, and he was a few years older than me, and he was like a weird movie buff. So like, I ended up watching like a bunch of classics, like The Usual Suspects and stuff like that, like because he just had a really, I guess, really good Criterion Collection taste in movies.
So did it have the same effect on you since you didn't see it like at the time where everyone was really talking about it and raving about it? Did it like the hype train not you didn't quite understand the hype train or
It didn't like blow me away, but I think like it was like, oh, that's an interesting twist to a movie. That may have actually been the first big movie twist I think I'd ever seen. But the whole time I never thought that what's his name was Kaiser Soze. Like that never occurred to me.
yeah, yeah. And
Also,
I definitely had that moment too. It was like that the Fight Club moment for me. I think Fight Club hit me a lot harder than The Usual Suspects did because I think I saw Fight Club at the age range I was supposed to see it at, and I saw it within enough time where the twist of that movie was still like relevant and talked about and really admired, and so I saw it I saw it on the hype of it. But yeah,
well, that was the game in the 90s though, right? It was like every movie needed to have a big twist. Like that was the big that big run of those movies like, oh, the ending is not what you think.
right. Yeah. And some of them did it really well. Like I think The Usual Suspects did it really well. I think Fight Club did it really well. But yeah, there are some where it's a little you're it's not as effective as they thought that it was going to be when they cut that trailer for it.
So I did have a question about Peter Greene's character in this. So was he the exact same guy from The Mask as he was in The Usual Suspects?
No. He was Dorian Tyrell in The Mask, and he
I
was
just like the idea. I like the idea that Redfoot either went on to become head of his own crime syndicate, or after that didn't work out, he then started working with the guys in The Usual Suspects.
Oh, well, that timeline doesn't quite work because he gets flushed down like a cartoon toilet in The Mask.
Okay, so The Mask would have to be the sequel of his character. So Redfoot becomes a crime boss and then gets flushed down the toilet, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think we're probably starting like some fucking urban myth or like
I
some
hope so.
about that. Oh God, yeah.
Because
No, it
do
kinda
they
makes
ever call
sense.
him anything besides Redfoot?
No, and
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
and I'm not even completely sure. I mean, we're gonna kind of. I mean, spoilers for The Usual Suspects, but I mean, the movie has been out for 30 years or whatever. Well, not quite 30 years, but a long time.
You're still gonna get an angry tweet, or at least one or two.
Right. There's still gonna be a comment in the comment section that is completely angry about us ruining The Usual Suspects.
Thanks for ruining The Usual Suspects and The Mask. God.
Yeah, like I was gonna watch both of those and now I can't. So I'm actually not completely sure that Redfoot even exists, and that's kind of the most interesting thing about that movie is that you know Kevin Spacey's character is getting all of the information from the board that is behind the police officers, and so like in the ending where the reveal is kind of happening and like the cop is realizing that he's been duped, he is like, you can see Redfoot is like part of something that's on that board. And
Really? I didn't even catch that.
yeah.
So he was a Tyler Durden. He wasn't even real. He was part of the story.
I think so. Yeah. I think that's what happened. I don't
Well, then,
or maybe
how much of the rest of like what happened wasn't real then?
it I that's something I've wondered since I've seen it. Like I don't know how I don't know how much of those events happened. I know at least some of those characters existed, like the guy, like his right hand man, the guy that like picks him up in the car at the end. Like obviously he exists.
Yeah.
but maybe like the names were changed, and like the order was switched around, or maybe people were given more importance than they actually had, or less importance than they actually had in the grand scheme of things. Like I really don't know. I've always wondered that, because so many of the names and whatnot are made up. So yeah, I have no idea. I guess that's like the fun of that movie. You just kind of get to go in and maybe decide for yourself how much of that was true. You know,
He does seem, I don't know, as a person who's been doing improv for many years, I feel like he seems like the first guy that discovered improv in the 90s, in that scene where he's talking to the detective and he's like, I used to pick coffee in Guatemala, and this coffee is shit. But I'm like, what are you fucking doing? You doing a tight 10? Like, what is happening right here? Is this an improv show? Like, cause it's obviously like just stream of consciousness, and the cop's like, really, like, buys everything. Like, he's the most yet least suspicious cop in New York City.
I thought, I rewatched The Usual Suspects recently for the podcast, and yeah, I thought that too. Like, as he's sort of rambling off these names and these events and sort of the stream of consciousness, I'm like, this doesn't really sound logical. Like, this doesn't sound like something that would happen. It sounds really weird,
Yeah, that that whole, like, I grew up outside Muncie, Indiana, or wherever it was, and then he's like, I was fruit picking in Guatemala, and then it's like, all right. Well, your fucking story's all over the place, like, but that cop's like, I'm gonna grill you, but also I'm going to accept everything you tell me is truth.
I think that's the only way that movie could have worked. I think if he would have been too competent, then the whole movie just would have, like, falling apart.
Yeah, because it all depends on that twist.
Right.
Yeah. No, but I never even thought about that. Like, Peter Greene's character not even actually existing. That's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of when I rewatched it, because I think in my past viewings of it, because I wasn't viewing it to discuss it on a podcast, I didn't think that deeply about it. I was just like, oh yeah, there's the twist, great. But yeah, as I was rewatching it, I did have that moment where I was like, I wonder if he is actually real, like, or like, maybe he was real but just didn't have that name, or maybe the way that Redfoot looks maybe that's the imagination of the cop. Maybe he does exist and under a different name, but he doesn't look anything like Peter Greene, and like
he's a tall Native American gentleman.
Right. And maybe Peter Greene was just like, that was the image that the cop had. Maybe the scenes that we're seeing are just like how the cop is imagining as he's hearing everything. That was something else I thought about too when I was watching it, because I'm like who is describing these people, like, because I mean, Kevin Spacey never really goes into any sort of descriptors about anyone, but we have, in the flashback scenes, we have images of all these people, and maybe this is the cop just sort of imagining, just from names and bullshit, that what these people look like, and his image of Redfoot, even though Redfoot does definitely sort of have like a Native American tone to it, he was just like, this Irish Catholic guy. I guess
the big plot point I don't understand, and maybe you can clarify this one. What is he afraid that the Hungarian guy is going to tell the police?
He's just afraid that he'll be able to tell the police what he looks like, because the whole thing was that Kaiser Soze was in the shadows. Yeah, like no one even knew if he actually existed, and so like the cops never really took any sort of information about him seriously, because he was just a fucking urban legend. But if the Hungarian guy was like, hey, no, this guy definitely exists, and let me get a sketch artist in here and I'll tell you what he looks like.
Well, like, they went through all that and the Hungarian guy still didn't die, right? Like, so it was all like kind of a moot point anyway. Didn't they get a sketch of him?
Yeah, they got a sketch of him, but he had already
got a sketch, and now a cop knows what you look like. Like, it seems like you made it worse.
But the thing is, he had already gotten immunity from any sort of repercussions. So
yeah, that's right. That's back in the 90s, whenever they would do that trope where they're like, he's got full diplomatic blanket immunity on all crimes in past and present ever committed. We can't touch him. Like, that's not a thing that actually exists. You know what I mean? Like, how many people died on the boat? Was it like they were like, we're fish like 27 bodies out of the water?
Right.
Yeah, they're going to promise you immunity, and then you're going to get 27 life sentences.
Yeah, I mean, more realistically, yes. But again, if that plot point would have been completely realistic in the film, the entire premise would have fallen apart. So
Also, there's a lot of dudes that look like Kevin Spacey, like just middle-aged white balding men. Like that's not a specific look, you know?
yeah, how are we just like completely dismantling this movie right now?
So what I do, man, I look at great works that other people have put blood, sweat, and tears in that are critically acclaimed, and then I just tear them down.
I guess in all, I guess there's not a whole lot to say about Peter's role in this. I mean, it's I'm happy it happened. I'm again, I love that he's in this film and that I can, and this is a film that I can point to whenever I'm talking about Peter, and I can go, he's in this film and he does this thing, and people go, oh yeah. But yeah, it's
well, also, I'm not hating on the film. I'm tearing down the 90s. The 90s had a lot of those, like, I'm a hard detective, but I'm trusting. Like, a lot of those, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You don't realize till you go back and watch His Usual Suspects. You go, this is a really good movie, but it was definitely made in the 90s.
Yeah. Since I've been watching so many films, just in general lately, like older films and newer films, you can definitely sort of pinpoint the timeline that things happened, just because of how people react and like the clothes and the way of thinking and whatnot. You can like just stick a pin right in the year that a lot of those are supposed to be happening in.
Especially anything to do with cops. You're like, yeah, this is the 70s, this is the 80s.
Yeah.
Very, very, very dated. The police.
I wasn't going to do the film.
Okay.
Because Reservoir Dogs had come out, and Laws of Gravity, a very small film I did at right about the same time, and Quentin liked that, and so there was this big buzz about Pulp Fiction, and I hadn't seen the script, and they wanted me in it, and I didn't know what the role was. Mm-hmm. So when I got the script, I was just floored. I was just thoroughly disappointed. Actually, the way it was written was I mean, it wasn't my cup of tea. Mm-hmm. And besides, if you ever saw Deliverance, you never saw the guy who took Ned Beatty and made him squeal like a pig ever again. So, you know, I didn't think it was a great career move.
Right.
But anyway, long story short, Quentin, I don't know why he pressed for me to do it, but he came back a couple of times, and then I finally said, I'll do it if I can do it any way I wanted to, thinking he would never say that he would allow me to do it. And so we just improvised the whole scene, and we kept the language that was there. It was a much more graphic scene originally, and you knew exactly what was going to happen from the very beginning, and so we just played around for a week. And he was good to his word. He was like Baby Huey behind the camera. When he likes something, he's like, yeah.
You get so excited.
Yeah. He's a wonderful guy.
So I guess we'll move on to Pulp Fiction now. So Pulp Fiction, it's still a small role, but it is
small but significant.
Right, it's definitely more punctuated than his role in The Usual Suspects. I think a lot of people remember Peter from this role, and he spends a lot of screen time just like writhing in pain on the floor. He doesn't even say a whole lot, but he does a whole lot, and he does it quite disturbingly. We were messaging back and forth for the last couple of weeks, just sort of to you know, kind of talk things out about the podcast and everything. And you text me something the other night that made me think that you actually did not rewatch Pulp Fiction like you were supposed to.
Wait, what did I text you that I didn't? That I said I didn't rewatch it.
You basically said, you were like, I'll watch it maybe.
Oh yeah. Because I tried to sit down and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna watch the Peter Greene scene, and I got about to the point in which he's got both Ving Rhames and Bruce Willis tied up with ball gags, And he's like, well, wake up the gimp. And I was like, I can't do it. Because that was such a weird, I think that was the first time in my childhood, by childhood, I mean my teenage years, because I came to Pulp Fiction late too. I had ever just been like watching a movie and popcorn, and then there was just brutal sexual assault just before my eyes. And I'm like, what?
So I think I'm completely desensitized to stuff like this because I watch that scene and it doesn't bother me. And I think maybe in the clip at the top of this segment, it was from the Sissy Gamache show. I really hope I am at least in the ballpark of the pronunciation of her last name because she's been so nice to me. But in the clip, he talks about how he actually talked Quentin down from a more explicit version of that scene. It was more horrid than that, if you can imagine.
Do you think that if Quentin Tarantino didn't have friends, he would just have started making snuff films at a certain point? Like without people to be like, Quentin, you're a filmmaker. You gotta calm down, baby. Like he's just making black market murder films for truckers.
Maybe his films are, or maybe his friends are like keeping them on track and keeping them from staying out of like the dark side of filmmaking.
Yeah.
But Peter absolutely did not want to do this scene, and the reason he actually gives is that like no, I've never seen Deliverance. I know this is out there, but I've never seen it. But his argument for not really wanting to do it was that the rape scene, the guy who does the squeal like a piggy bit in Deliverance was never seen again, and so he didn't really think it was all that great of a career move.
Because I love the Deliverance. I love the book. The book's really good. The movie, and like I saw the movie at like an early age. I think after Pulp Fiction, where I'm like, all right, I'm gonna watch this movie. You know what? I'm gonna get away from the graphic sexual assault content and just put on a movie about men surviving. And then I was like, oh no, not again. No, I guess the two hillbillies. You never see them again. But like, what's his name? Ned Beatty, the guy that got sodomized in that movie, had a long career, and I think is still alive.
Yeah, hopefully. No, yeah, and he said nothing about Ned Beatty not having a career. It was just the guys who actually did the.
To be fair though, those guys, if that's how they really look, they were chosen for a very specific role, and I can't imagine that kind of like weird Appalachia birth defect look really working for any other movies. I guess you could be a character actor, but I don't see, and apologies to those guys if they ever listen to this, but fellas, you definitely have a very specific look to you.
Right. Yeah. And I've never seen it, but I've definitely, I've seen the memes, and I feel like I've seen like at least that, or parts of that scene, or that portion of it, because I mean, it's sort of one of those pop culture things now. It's parodied and
well, it's parodied to the point that's like uncomfortable, where like you'll have these t-shirts that families buy on vacation in places in the mountains and be like, paddle faster, I hear banjo's coming. Wouldn't that be great to have on a shirt with me and Nana? No, it wouldn't. Who thought that was funny?
Oh my god. I feel so bad for Peter in this, when he talks about this film, and actually in one of Sissy's interviews, I think it's the first one, she's done two with him, but in the first one she actually rolls part of the clip from Pulp Fiction like while she's interviewing Peter, and he becomes part of the couch. He just shrinks, and he's I don't want to watch it. Like it's not one of those things I want to relive.
Yeah, let's not. Also, can we talk about how many times must he have apologized to Ving Rhames just shooting that scene? You know what I mean? Because that's so. It's like, hey, it's emotionally difficult as an actor to do something like that, but also Ving Rhames is a very scary looking man, and so yeah, like you're like, wait, I'm gonna do what to Ving Rhames? Is Ving okay with this?
Right. Yeah.
Because if Ving's not okay with this, I'm not okay with this.
I imagine there was a lot of apologies from Peter. A lot of like awkwardness. From Peter also.
It's so difficult because it's a huge movie and a huge director, and it's a great movie, and like you get to work some really really great talent, but also you have to rape Ving Rhames. Like that's like one of those games you play with your friends in a car ride. Where you're like, all right, would you rather lose your hands or rape Ving Rhames?
Right.
Like, oh, those both sound awful. I don't want to do either one of those.
And like imagine like at this point Reservoir Dogs was already out and it was a huge movie, and Quentin Tarantino was being hailed as this genius director and writer and whatnot. And imagine that you're someone and you've been actually sought out by Quentin Tarantino,
yes.
and you get the script and you realize that the vision that this director has had for you is that you're gonna sodomize Ving Rhames on camera. In the discussion that we've been having for the last couple of weeks, we were talking about rewatching Pulp Fiction, and you actually expressed like very early on, you were like, that scene was fucking terrifying, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to watch it and not flinch. And so when I went to watch it, I was like, well, maybe when I go to watch it, maybe I'll find it like super uncomfortable too. And yeah, it's bad, but you know, I'm not affected by it that much.
It's also odd. I think the other thing is it's oddly placed. That's the other thing, is like that it's just kind of out of left field.
Yes, it is. And the weird thing about it is you can play the entirety of Pulp Fiction and leave that scene out, and the
movie continues. Yeah,
the movie plays almost the exact same way. They probably could have cut that scene, but again, like you said, Quentin Tarantino rides really close to like the snuff line sometimes.
Yeah, it's the same with that nurse from Kill Bill. Like if you cut out the guy, I'm Buck and I like to fuck, movie goes on exactly the same.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Like I don't know if he's throwing it in there to make his audience like, or if he really is like, this is avant-garde, but like, damn.
I think it's a little of both. I think he sees some sort of message and meaning in everything that he does. I don't see Quentin as someone who just does stuff for like shock value. I think he justifies it in his mind as it being completely integral to the story, to show this rent-a-cop raping Ving Rhames.
I think the only movie he's done that didn't have a like moment for me was Django Unchained. I think that was the only one where I was like 100% fuck yeah, get him, and like there was no like, and let's take a left turn into this thing. Like that movie was straight through. But yeah, everything else I feel like it's like now I'm looking for the weird Shyamalan speed bump. I'm like, oh fuck, what's gonna happen to who?
Yeah, I totally agree. Django was completely every scene in that was necessary. It was beautifully told. So yeah, I think that kind of wraps up Pulp Fiction. It's he's there, and I think my feelings on Pulp Fiction and Peter's role in it is, I think anyone could have done that role, but I think he's the only one that could have made it that memorable. Like,
yeah, and he definitely stands out. Like, and he's one of those actors too. It doesn't matter what you give him. Like, you remember him. Like, he stands out. He does a really bang up job with whatever he's in.
Yeah, like he shows up to show out all the time. Like it doesn't matter the size of his role. Like he, you always remember that you've seen Peter Greene in a film.
He upsets me. He reminds me of the old theater teacher thing where they go, remember guys, there's no small parts, only small actors. And I was always like, fuck you, what am I, Peter Greene?
That's awesome. I think that's quite a compliment, actually.
Yeah. So my point is, I'm a small actor and I get small parts. So
I think you need to take the Peter Greene approach. I think you need to be memorable in every single thing you do, no matter what it is.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's just life advice.
Yeah, that is life advice. Hello, everyone. Amanda here. So Peter VanPelt is one of my favorite people to pick the brain of. He is super funny and insightful. So naturally, I completely forgot to ask him to plug what he was working on at the end of the episode. So I'm going to do it. Peter has a podcast called Those Muckrakers, and it is part advice column, part politics, part current events. It's really funny. He hosts with a guy named Pat. They have they just sound like they're having a lot of really good laughs. So I will link that into the show notes, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening to the episode at least half as much as we enjoyed recording it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.